This photograph was taken in the basement of, I believe, my Uncle Jack's home on Bond Street in London. It indicates it's 1949. On the left is my Uncle Jack. Um, he did not serve in the First World War. It's kind of funny, but at the outbreak, whenever it was 1914, 1915, whenever he was eligible age-wise, he tried to sign up for the Canadian Expeditionary Force, and they turned him down because he was too short. He was a short guy, 5'2", and that wasn't good enough. So, but he was a trier. He came back a year or two later, as I recall, and tried to enlist again, and again he turned him down because he was too short. The man in the middle is my grandfather, Stuart Donald. I think originally he was just a farmer, but for most of his working life, he worked for a large agricultural machinery company. It wasn't Massey Ferguson or Massey Harris, but it was a big organization. Unfortunately for him, as he was approaching retirement at age 65, which was standard back then, he was driving to work early one morning, and his car crossed a railway track at an unfortunate time and was struck, T-boned by a locomotive, and he was killed, which was unfortunate for him. He'd had his retirement planned out. He'd purchased 50 acres of land in and around Plimpton Township, and he planned with a farmhouse and barn on it, and he planned on raising Black Angus cattle for beef. The man on the right is my father, Robert Donald, 4 years away from the Second World War when he was Lance Corporal in the Canadian Army. Served. He landed at Normandy, but he wasn't one of the initial waves. I think he told me one time he was in the 22nd wave of troops landing at Normandy. He was associated with a communications group. They drove around in radio trucks and stuff like that. This is a true relic of 1940s culture. This is a bar in the basement of my Uncle Jack's house on Bond Street. At the beginning of my life, my parents lived in a home in Lambeth, which was a suburban, semi-rural area just outside of London, Ontario. This notation in my father's handwriting says the house that Arblasters made. I don't know if that means they had a hand in the construction. I doubt it. He was not a handyman type, or that they were the owners and had a general contractor built it. I have no idea, but there it is. We didn't live there that long. We subsequently moved to Sarnia. This is me, a couple of days more than 1 month old, being held by my mother. This presumably is somewhere in London or Lambeth, Ontario. Here I am, a few months old. I have no idea what I've got on my head, whether it's half a cantaloupe or some kind of space helmet. Here I am. I look about a year old. That's my older brother, Wayne, who's virtually 4 years older than me. I look here to be a year and a half, 2 years old. I'm playing with one of those tops that you push down and it spins. I do remember those drapes. I appear to have a full-fledged Western outfit here. A hat, a vest, and a revolver. This is a clipping from the Sarnia Free Press newspaper. I dated around 1952. Going left to right, that's my cousin Rosalie Higgins, my father, Robert, me, my cousin Michael Higgins, and my older brother Wayne. It's at some Kiwanis event. My father was a member of Kiwanis well into the 1960s. This is a staged photograph. I'm sure my parents paid someone to take it. It would have been taken in Montreal when we lived on the island. This is my father and mother in August 1954, standing in front of my parents' Buick coupe. Here I am standing in front of that same Buick. This photograph would have been taken in the early 50s, in the year or two that we lived in Sarnia. We lived in the upper half of a quadruplex on Prince Edward Drive on Montreal Island from the time I was about 3 until I was 6, more or less. Here's a photograph of my whole family. My younger brother, John, who was 4 years younger than me, sitting to my left, and you can see my older brother and I both have on coonskin caps, which were all the rage in those days of Davy Crockett on Walt Disney. So this Christmas photograph was taken at our apartment in the quadruplex on Prince Edward Drive on Montreal Island. You can see my brother, older brother Wayne, in the left-hand bottom corner, looking a bit distracted. I'm looking straight at the camera with my bolo tie. There must be something going on to the left because my younger brother John's also looking in that direction. This is my grandfather, of course, Stuart Donald, and my mother and father. I can't say what prompted the setup, but it's pretty clear somebody was having fun. I'm wearing my father's overcoat. I've got a pad in my hand and a pen in my hand. I seem to be delivering a stern lecture. My brother there has on my father's hat, looking a little lost. But he's got a briefcase in front of him. Here I am at the age of 10, 1960, playing with a badminton racket. As you can see, I was a little on the husky side back then. This is my mother and my two brothers and me standing in front of what was then the family car. It was a later model Buick. I think it was a 1960. Color was white. It was a convertible. It had a red leather interior, power windows, the whole schmozzle. Another picture taken in October 1960, but at a different location, and I expect. Every August, from the time I was 5 or 6, my Uncle Ted and Aunt Ivy would take my older brother and me, and on a couple of the years, my older cousin Ron Cool, to Hampton Beach, New Hampshire. They rent a summer place for a couple of weeks. We'd go down from Montreal by bus, return by bus, and I think on the last occasion, my younger brother John came along. Here we are in front of one rental. My Uncle Ted and I are standing in front of a jockey that was planted in front of what was the five-star hotel of Hampton Beach, New Hampshire. You can see a reflection in the window of one of the other statues on the property of an Indian. Totally politically incorrect these days. We had a lot of fun in the Atlantic Ocean surf, but the water was always cold. Nonetheless, we went in and even snorkeled. Here my Aunt Ivy, me, and my older cousin Ron Cool are sitting on the beach at Hampton Beach, New Hampshire. There's a gentle surf. He went on to become eventually the chief mechanic of Air Canada. Being New Hampshire, most of the buildings in Hampton Beach were constructed of wood, and clearly they have vulnerabilities. Standing on the porch of that same rental, I see I'm wearing a t-shirt with flamingos on it. That would have been a prize from a trip my parents and my grandfather Stuart took to Florida in about 1953, 54. This is my older brother Wayne, my cousin Ron, my youngest brother John, and me in front of that same rental. We used it year after year. This, I guess, would be 1959. I can recall at night we were down at the Oceanside. There's a bandstand there, and there'd be a band playing. And one night we were down there. The band stopped. The band leader pointed up in the sky and said, "There's the Sputnik." And it was, I think, Sputnik number 3 that the Russians sent into space going by. You could just see this tiny spot of light moving across the sky. I'm goofing around here with my Uncle Ted. He loved his beer. He was a true Englishman and also an inveterate pipe smoker. We moved from Prince Edward Drive on Montreal Island to this house on the south shore of the St. Lawrence River in an area called Prayville, which was part of St. Lambert, the town of St. Lambert back in that day. The address is 101 Languedoc Drive. You'll see in this picture a large tree behind my mother and someone else. In the winter of 1958, that tree that we'd seen in the previous picture is gone, and there is a mountain of snow. The house was on a corner.